Hey, welcome to Let's Unravel, and I'm your friend Christina. So, pop culture question, who is your Spider-Man? The reason why I ask this is because I keep seeing all these photos of Tom Holland filming in Scotland for the new upcoming Spider-Man movie, and it just made me think, once again, who is the best Spider-Man, or should I say, who is your Spider-Man? I will let you know who I consider to be my Spider-Man at the end of this episode, but I gotta know yours, so drop a comment below. Now, like always, thanks again for stopping by, whether you're a new listener or a friend of the show. I just wanted to say welcome. And before you start to fast forward or speed through this portion of the episode, I just want to say I'm not going to bore you with the whole like, comment, and subscribe. I mean, those things do help us further the show and reach a new audience and, build some traction. Maybe I am going to talk about it, actually. No, I'm not. I'm not going to bore you with that. Anyways, but if you find parts of the show that you enjoy, feel free, like always, drop a comment, a like, 5-star rating, wherever, however you listen. So jumping into our win of the week this week, I'm really excited about this win. This pertains to our episode last week when I was talking about my love for sticky notes and how I rebranded our key takeaways to thoughts that stick, sticky thoughts. This win is I actually got from a friend. It is a notebook filled with sticky notes. It's really cool. So if you are watching on YouTube, you will have seen I have this sticky note book that's filled with sticky notes. That's filled with sticky notes. And if you are listening on Apple Podcast or Spotify, I had gotten this miniature little notebook. Inside, there's a bunch of different sizes and colors of Post-it notes. And like I said last week, anytime I think I have $1 million idea, I write it on sticky notes. And a fun fact is a lot of times when I was younger and I thought I had $1 million ideas, I'd write them on napkins because I'd always heard the best ideas happen on napkins. Like if you've ever heard of musicians saying they wrote their greatest hit, they wrote it on a napkin because big things happen on napkins. And then I slowly decided that I had way too many napkins with just mediocre ideas. So instead I switched to Post-it notes, and now I just have piles and piles of Post-it notes because once again, I always think these ideas that I have are $1 million ideas because if you can't root for yourself, who will? Anyways, so for our win of this week, it was just a shout out to a friend who had given me this little notebook filled with Post-it notes. It's awesome. It's going to be a really helpful tool as I continue to write new episodes for the show. So big thank you to you. Now let's dive right into our topic of the week. So what are we going to unravel today? Let's unravel silent surrender. Now, if you're anything like me, whenever I think of the word surrender, I don't really get a warm and fuzzy feeling inside. Actually, I always tend to feel quite uncomfortable at the thought of it. And dare I even say, it almost feels like it could be this dirty word. And the reason why is because growing up, so I have an older brother, and so we're about 8 years apart. And so growing up, we would go over to my grandma's house and we'd have all of our cousins, and we did this family tradition where we'd eat pizza on Saturday night. So all of us, we would eat pizza together. And once we were done eating, all the kids would go outside to play. So I was one of the youngest, and I was also the only girl because I had a bunch of boy cousins. And I remember one of the games that we loved to play was cops and robbers. It was always so funny because you broke off into teams 2 or 3 and you would just be cops or robbers. I was always the youngest and I was the girl, so I ran slower than all the boys because I was younger. Anyways, whenever we'd be playing this game, it would always get to be this point where I would get cornered and then they would say, do you surrender or do you give up? And of course you're always never. I am never going to surrender. And then they grab you and then you're like, okay, I surrender. I give up. Maybe that is why when I look at surrender, I'm always thinking about giving up. If there's anything that I've learned throughout the course of my early 20s and even mid 20s and even now, my late 20s, surrender isn't about giving up. It's about the art of letting go. And that is something that I think is really unique about surrender. And it doesn't make it any more comfortable to me, I can promise you that. But it does provide a deeper clarity to it. Without realizing it, I had really built a false narrative around surrender. I was so focused on this idea of giving things up when really it was the art of letting go. And what's so interesting about surrender that I have learned in my life is it's humbling. If there's one thing I've learned about the art of letting go is it is in fact very humbling. The reason why I called this silent surrender is because surrendering oftentimes is silent. It's not something that your peers or the people that you love around you are adequately aware of the fact that you are surrendering something or letting something go. A lot of times, and sometimes people are aware, you think about when you start to date somebody and you start to realize things aren't kind of lining up. You guys aren't going in the same direction. Ultimately, there's a breakup. So there is a surrendering and a realizing that this isn't going to work. In moments like that, yes, it's easy to see the surrendering, the art of letting go. But what's worse is when you're in that sticky little situation right prior to dating where you're not quite a something, but you're not quite a nothing. And then there's this moment where all of a sudden it's, if it doesn't pan out, are you ready to let that person go? And that is something about surrender that's so interesting. You know, you can surrender ideas, you can surrender dreams, but surrendering someone that you care about, maybe someone you love, and to let them go. And it's so funny because if there was one quote or one saying that my mom would always say to me growing up, and I'm sure you've heard it a million times over in rom-coms and movies everywhere, is if you love something and you set it free, if it comes back, it's yours. And if it doesn't, it was never yours. Now, don't ask me who said that first. I tried to look it up. I couldn't find out who was the original source. So for now, it's just unknown. But growing up, I heard that phrase everywhere, whether it was my mom, whether it was a rom-com, you name it. It's one of those quotes where you don't mind hearing it in movies, because in a movie, you have about, let's say, 90 minutes, 2 hours, and the whole problem, the whole dilemma gets resolved by the end of it. But to sit in life and to see someone that you pictured your whole world with, and then all of a sudden have to be faced with this moment of you can chase them or you can let them go. Because if you let them go, if they're really yours, they'd come back. That is the worst feeling in the world, because it just feels like slow motion. Everything is slowing down. All of a sudden, all of the Taylor Swift songs just start to make sense. But that's what the unique thing is about surrender. So you have surrender in love, you have surrender in life. You know, if there's one thing I feel like I've learned a lot in my 20s is having to surrender these ideas of what I thought life would look like and what dreams I thought I would have in the process of letting go. Like we said, there's letting go of love, letting go of dreams, there's letting go of expectations. Like I remember I had said something in episode 1 about how life, oftentimes it's like a GPS. You need to have an idea of where you're going so you know how really what roads to take. So letting go of love and having these ideas and these hopes and these dreams, it hurts. And it's a different kind of hurt and it's a different type of pain, you know? The Taylor Swift songs, they all start to make sense. Then you start to experience the hurt and the pain of dreams unfulfilled, passions falling flat, thinking that if you did your best, things would just shake out the way that they're supposed to shake out. So in the process of letting go, I think it'd be really easy to just focus on the letting go, kind of like in the rom-com movies. And I'm not saying that's easier. What I'm saying is there's different types of pain. There's different types of letting go. And if there's one thing I've learned about surrender, one thing I've learned about letting go, is the best way to visualize it is to think of it like a coin. It's like a double-sided coin. And my favorite coin, you know, let's think of like a quarter. So you have heads and you have tails. And if your childhood was anything like mine, where you would get quarters and you would make bets and you'd say heads, I win this, tails, you lose that. I look at surrender like it's heads, and I look at pain as its tails, because surrender is coming to the end of yourself in something. And a lot of times you can't get to the end of yourself, unfortunately, without going through quite a bit of pain. And so letting go, there's so many things that we can let go of. And something that I think about in this whole podcasting journey that I've been doing is having some time to do some self-reflection. And with being 28, I've been thinking about how 10 years ago, I was 18, and 18-year-old Christina graduating high school, embarking on just life and adulthood and not knowing what was out there yet. And so one of my favorite things that TikTok was doing this trend about, I sat down with my younger self and I had a conversation and I told her everything was going to work out and be all right. And I think that's great because, you know, there's something about those conversations that are really healing to your younger self. And then there's something just really interesting about if you really stop and you think about, okay, if I'm sitting at a table and I'm talking to my 18-year-old self and she would be asking me questions point blank, like 18-year-old Christina desperately wanted to go to film school, and it'd be like, did you write a script for a movie? Did you get into film production? Did we do all of the things? Did we make it to Paris? Because that was something I was desperately wanting to do when I was younger. And at 28, you know, I get to sit here and I can easily say, no, you didn't go to film school, and no, you didn't write a script for a movie. But what I can say is she did make it to Paris. And it's funny because you can look at those things and In a way, you can feel sorry for yourself where it's like, oh man, I didn't make it to film school. Oh man, I didn't write that script for that movie. What's also the beautiful thing about surrender is you start to realize dreams change and dreams don't always look the way that you initially intended. And I think that is what the beauty of life is. The dreams that we think we have, and then you start to embark and you start to realize, hey, that's not what I necessarily thought I wanted. Things start to course correct. One of the first times I really had to let go of something, it was letting go of dreams, but not in a, oh my gosh, my dreams were crushed, but more in a, I had to let go of what I thought the dream was or what the ideal dream was. And like I said, a lot of it had to do focused around how I had thought I wanted to be in film school and how I wanted to take this very traditional route of trying to break into movie production. Then what I had started to realize is by working film internship and started to see how you create, I started to see what the process was behind film production. And when I was younger, I just always assumed the director had all of the control. Like that was where, or actually when I was younger, I really thought it was all the actors. And then as I got older, I was like, no, it's the director. The director has all the inspiration and everything like that. And then I started to realize the director isn't the one that writes the script. Sometimes they will, but for the most part, usually you have a writer. When I had started to realize that, the dream slowly started to change where it wasn't about being the actress, it wasn't about being the director, and then all of a sudden landing that it's the words on the page. That's where my dream lied. It was on the page. And that was something that was unique, that if you don't start making these steps towards these dreams or ideas or goals that you have, you would never know how they're going to course correct over time until you start to step into them. By the time I had started to realize that my heart was more involved in the words, which you would think I would have known that, knowing that a dictionary was my favorite book at the age of 8. Except, sometimes you yourself can be a slow learner, or maybe I'm a slow learner. I'm also very stubborn. Anyways, I'm not going to out myself like that anymore. Moving forward. But the point is, I remember feeling crushed in this moment of thinking, well, I thought my dream was I wanted to go to film school. I thought my dream was I wanted to do big movie productions. And all of a sudden, these things just started to fall flat because it wasn't bringing me the joy or the satisfaction I had thought it was going to. And that was where I had found myself in this moment. And it's so funny because all of these moments of letting go, I'm usually in my car. I was in my old 97 Honda Accord. It was my character building car where I would sit and I would just have these moments where I'd be like, maybe this isn't it. Maybe there's something else out there that I want that isn't necessarily this. And one of the biggest things I've learned about letting go is it looks like loss at first, but it's actually in preparation for a wider future. Oftentimes, you have to let go of something good to get to something better. And it's the same thing in career. It's the same thing in love, that a lot of times you find people and they're saying that they're willing to settle because they're like, well, this person they're good or they're nice. And I remember hearing even this in dating where someone had said, nice is the bare minimum. It's the requirement. Like, this isn't like, wow, his selling factor is he's nice. That was something that genuinely kind of rocked my world, where I was like, you know what, that is true. Like, nice is like the bare minimum. Like, you should be, if I'm going out with you, you should be nice. Like, why would we settle for someone that's not nice? But it also goes back to letting go, where we want to hold on to everything for dear cost. By holding on to everything for dear cost, we lose a part of ourselves. I think that's something that we don't talk about enough, is any standards that you might have. When you start to hold on to things and you start to muddy up your standards, that's when I think you start to realize how deep you're in. And it makes you not want to surrender even more because you're like, I've given up a piece of myself at this point. And what I'm trying to say in all of this is, honestly, surrender leaves me speechless. There's a song by Mumford Sons, and it's called Surrender. And I remember hearing this, I think it was like 2 or 3 lines in their song, and the line goes, defeat and surrender always feel the same to me. But what does it matter? They both bring me to my knees. And there's nothing I love more than when an artist or a musician can really embody a whole feeling into a song, because I remember hearing those phrases and it hit me to my core, because there's just some words and some feelings, no matter how hard you try to describe, you can't quite embody it. And then when someone just nails it so perfectly on the head, it's like, wow, I feel seen. Something else that I really focus on with this concept of surrender is silence. And silence is such an uncomfortable word or feeling. Honestly, if you're someone that can sit in silence and you're good with that, that is the biggest superpower you can possibly have, because so many people don't know how to sit in silence. So many people, I mean, myself included, you want to drown out the noise around you. I mean, I live my life with headphones in my ears, and it's not because I'm afraid of silence. Truthfully, I just love music. I really do. But the thing with silence, and honestly, I found another song that talks about silence, but the thing with silence is it's very revealing. That is usually what people are running from. It's kind of like when you ask someone like, hey, I have this problem. What's the problem? The person says, the problem's you. And we're all being honest with ourselves. To some level, I think we can be aware that we might be part of the problem. But in other ways, we don't want to reveal that either. It's easier to point the finger and look at someone else and say, oh my gosh, that person does not have it together. This couldn't possibly be me. And then there's moments where, like I said, when you sit in silence and you can't escape what's right in front of you. And what's a lot of time right in front of you is yourself. I've had those moments of having to sit in silence, and it's exhausting. And like I said, there was this song, it's by 21 Pilots, and the song is called Car Radio. These lines always get me. And so it goes, I have these thoughts, so often I ought to replace that slot with what I once bought, because somebody stole my car radio, and now I just sit in silence. In this whole song, it's really just about this guy's car radio. I remember hearing an interview from the guy who wrote the song, and he was just like, yeah, like I had a car and somebody stole my car radio, and now I was driving around in silence. And he was talking about how that silence, it was deafening. You think about those things because why? You're left with yourself. And so silent surrender, when we focus on these two words, and they're both very uncomfortable words, where you're left with yourself. This is a soul man job where it's just you. As much as you might want to surrender in groups, and you can think about the battle movies, like you think about wars and how it's like they surrender and they let go, but very rarely are there moments in life where you actually get to surrender in group settings. I think when you do things like that in group setting, it creates a bond, whereas when you're having to let go and you're doing it on your own, it's a lot harder. And so when I was having these moments where I would sit in my car and I was looking at the life that I thought I wanted to go to film school. I thought I wanted to have a life that looked like creating movies. And then all of a sudden starting to realize that maybe that's not necessarily the dream I thought I wanted. Then the most just normal life thing happens where as you get older and you just start to realize, like, reality sinks in. And there's these moments of where you're like, well, I need a job. I have to work. I need money. I need to do these things. I remember there was this moment in my life. I was 25. I was in the middle of finishing up a writing project I was on. I realized, okay, I need to get another job. I need to move into something else. And from the time I was like 18 years old, I've had a lot of family members who have worked in insurance, and they always highly recommended it. And at this point in time, I was 25. I had done the starving artist thing of trying to make a go of a lot of different things. Like I said, I tried to break into film and do different things like that. I didn't end up going to film school, but I had done film internships. And by the time I was 25, I had really gotten to this point of where I'm like, you know what? I want a really good job. The kind of job where I have health insurance, the kind of job where it's like a 9-to-5. After years, like 7 years, 18 to 25, I remember thinking, I will never get a job in insurance. Never. That was not where my passion was at all. And then the funny thing about becoming an adult is the things that you think you'll never do, somehow you end up doing them. And so there was this opportunity that ended up knocking at my doorstep about entering the insurance world. When I was looking at life, and I had started to realize, as much as I loved storytelling, as much as I loved movies and film, I had started to uncover and realize I loved business. That was something that I had started to realize when I was working in a retail store and I was working in management positions, and I had started going to these corporate meetings, and I'd have meetings with their HR teams and just different experiences and exposures that way. So when I had this opportunity come knock at my door about if I wanted to break into the insurance world, as I started to look at it, and I realized, I'm like, I think this could be something I'm really interested in. Whereas 18-year-old Christina would have been like, heck no. She would have slammed that door so fast. Whereas being 25 and having seen things and surrendering what I thought my expectations were on dreams, thinking life was just black and white. And then all of a sudden having this moment where having an opportunity that ended up propelling me into a whole career, and just saying yes in that moment, was a form of surrendering. It was a form of letting go that whatever my expectations were, whatever my ideals were, I was letting those go so that I could step into something new. And taking that job in insurance drastically changed my life. It gave me mentors, it gave me experiences, but ultimately what it did was it awoke things in me that were dormant. Things where I knew I liked business, but by the time I had come to the end of that experience, I realized how much I loved it. That as much as I loved high-paced environments, I liked the pressure. Honestly, I loved working with high-performing achievers. It was so exciting to be in rooms with big thinkers and having these incredible ideas and then building something out of nothing. It was something that was unlike any experience before. And could I have gotten that on a film set? Sure, because once again, you're creating something out of a nothing. But in this instance, I never would have thought that was something I would have gotten out of insurance. And that was something that was so beautiful that if I hadn't let go of my expectations, if I hadn't been willing to surrender. And in the moment, it was terrifying. In the moment, it was silent. It was deafening. It was scary because it was the unknown. And that is the scariest part of surrender, is the unknown. And it's funny because something that actually makes me think about all of this, and if you haven't found out by now that I love pop culture, I talk about movies, TV shows, pop culture, event thing, something that had occurred, I think within the last week or two, maybe even month, is so the tea brand, Pure Life Tea. They had started this marketing campaign where they got vending machines and they put them all around New York City. All that a customer had to do was they would walk up to the machine. I think it might have been free. And all they had to do was they just had to put their phone on this little, there was a box in the machine. So you just put it on this ledge. So they put it in, the box closes so you can't get your phone, and then you pick which tea that you want. And then the tea pops out and they set a timer. And I think it was somewhere between 2 and 5 minutes. The machine would not give the buyer back their phone. And then they had all these couches set up around these Pure Life Tea vending machines. And they're take a tea break. This marketing campaign went viral. This was so popular. And it was so cool because by the end of the time frame, whether it was 2 or 5 minutes, all of these people were wow, I feel really relaxed, because they had removed their phone from them. They had taken this moment of just silence. They didn't have anything to distract them. They sat there. They had to let go of the fact that they weren't going to have their phone. And to think about moments like that, where how often are we allowing ourselves to sit in silence? And how often are we actually letting go? Picking our hands up and just letting go. And don't get me wrong, I can be a control freak about things. I mean, I can be a perfectionist. I mean, I look at this whole podcast and I would have loved to have everything planned out to the nines. And one of the biggest things I learned from working at a startup is no matter how much you plan, things never go to plan. That was something I had to learn. And even in moments when I had been so burnt out that it felt impossible to get up in the morning, to keep working, and there was just a part of me that was slowly saying, you have to let go. It was letting go of control. I had to let go of control. I had to surrender this idea of control and trying to make everything come together. And there's so many ways and there's so many places where you can surrender. And going back to the idea of surrendering love, I mean, you can look at the show, The Summer I Turned Pretty. It's been the summer show for the last 3-4 years now. And you look at the main characters, you look at Belly and Conrad and Jeremiah. And I did ask you for which team you're on last week. If you missed last week's episode, drop a comment below. Let me know what team you're on, Conrad or Jeremiah. But when you look at them, and I also, after watching the first season of the show, I went out and bought all 3 books and read all of the books because I had to know how it ended, because control freak. Anyways, but when you look at Conrad, even in this latest season, And you see it in season 1 and you see it in 2, and there's such a deep love and connection and loyalty to Belly that he has, except he doesn't know how to express it. And so ultimately, what does he end up doing is he ends up surrendering. He lets her go. He lets her go because he knows that in the moment that he's at, he can't necessarily be the best thing for her. But what's also cool is on the flip side, kind of like that double-sided coin idea, is you have Conrad on one side and on the other side you have Belly, where in the books, I believe she actually says that she surrenders Conrad. Like, she lets him go. She lets him go from her heart so that she can openly embrace Jeremiah. There's so many moments in cinema, TV shows, you name it, where people, they come to the end of themselves and they have to let go. There's a natural part where you have to work really, really hard to obtain certain things. But if there's been one thing that I've learned is the more you chase someone, the more you'll chase them continuously. And if there was one moment that stopped me in my tracks is in this moment, like with Belly, she's chasing after Conrad. I think a lot of girls can relate to this moment, and guys, where there's this moment where you're chasing after someone or something, and all of a sudden you stop. And there's a great line from the movie My Best Friend's Wedding, where Julia Roberts' character is chasing after the groom and the groom is chasing after his bride. And she is on the phone with like her best friend and she goes, "I'm chasing after the groom." I can't remember his name. "I'm chasing after the groom." And he goes, "Who's chasing you?" And all of a sudden she stops and she realizes, oh my God, no one's chasing me. And that's the point. And the art of letting go is when we stop. When we're the ones chasing the something, when you stop, it goes back to that quote, if it's yours, it'll come back to you. And if it's not, it was never yours to begin with. And the control side of me wants to say, no, it's still mine. The part where freedom and peace lie, it's in the letting go. It's in the surrendering. And so even with The Summer I Turned Pretty, which if you like the show, The Summer I Turned Pretty, it also makes me think of Sabrina. And there's a couple different remakes of the movie Sabrina. My favorite was always the one with Audrey Hepburn, but there is a Harrison Ford version. It's the same concept of where you have this girl, she's been pining after this one individual, and then this moment comes where maybe it's not necessarily all that she thought it was. And so she surrenders, she lets go the idea that she had to actually pursue what's been pursuing her this whole time. Leads me to this really important idea that I wish I had in my early 20s is surrender is always a conscious decision. You can't unconsciously decide to surrender. It is a conscious decision. Now, unconsciously, you can do self-sacrificing. Sacrificing is not surrendering. A lot of times the way I view surrendering is the act of reevaluating an investment. It's seeing what you bought into and seeing if that's something that you still want to stay committed to or if you ultimately want to sell or get out. Sacrificing is ultimately putting someone else's values, opinions higher than yours. And so going back to that idea, surrender is always a conscious decision. So anyone who has surrendered or let go of anything in their life, they know it's a marking point in their life. It's something that they can look back on and they can see it and they know it for a fact. And it also brings me back, man, I notice in every single one of these podcast episodes, I tell you guys, this is my favorite movie. And I mean, I have a lot of favorites. Maybe I'll just have to make a catalog of all my favorite movies. But it actually leads me to another one of my favorite movies. And it was The Devil Wears Prada. I love this movie so much. So in the top of the episode, I had mentioned how 18-year-old Christina had desperately wanted to go to Paris. And I had said 28-year-old Christina had in fact made it to Paris. Fun fact, my international flight, I watched The Devil Wears Prada because it was one of my favorite movies. There's this really iconic scene in The Devil Wears Prada. It's at the end of the movie. So you have Meryl Streep's character, who is Miranda Priestley, and you have Anne Hathaway's character, who is Andy. And there's this moment where they're driving around Paris and they're in this car and Andy is confronting Miranda Priestley's character and just saying, I couldn't do all the backbiting things that she's done and the undermining and all these things. And it's so funny because Meryl Streep's character says to Anne Hathaway's character and says, you already did it. Like, I don't know what you're talking about. And in that moment, Anne Hathaway is like, I didn't do it. She goes, I didn't have a choice. And Meryl Streep's character is like, oh, you always have a choice. And just as they pull up to this venue, as Meryl Streep's character gets out of the car and starts walking into the venue, she turns around to look for Anne Hathaway and she's not there. What we see as the viewer, we see that she got out of the car and walked to the other side of the street because she had decided that was the life she didn't want. And to make the whole thing better is you have Meryl Streep's character calling her on the phone. She just tosses the phone right into the fountain or whatever was there. There's just this smile on her face, and it was this idea of she surrendered. She let it go. She let go because right before she got out of the car, Meryl Streep's character had said, everybody wants this life. And so when she got out of the car and threw the phone into the fountain and she walks away, it was her silent surrender. Like, that's not true. Not everybody wants this life. It re-solidifies this idea that surrender and giving up are not the same. Andy didn't give up the life. She surrendered it. She let it go because surrender is about reevaluating the investment, whereas giving up is really this idea of throwing the investment into the trash. So next time, when you go to look at these moments in your life where you realize they're not fulfilling, because every person wants purpose. If we're honest with ourselves, we want purpose. We want to know that what we're doing matters, that as we show up, these things matter to us greatly. And when they're not really serving this purpose that we long for, we do have to find a way to surrender those things too. And letting go creates more ground for us to eventually obtain what it is that we long for. And in those moments of surrender, there has been one thing that I've learned is loyalty is actually like a best friend or a very close ally to surrender, because in those moments when you're letting things go and it almost feels as though you have nothing, you'll be amazed to see who are the people that actually show up for you. And sometimes it's not the people you would expect, but then you realize those are the people that are the most loyal to you or for you. In those journeys, you find the parts of you that are loyal to yourself. And while you're in the precursor to surrender, in the precursor of letting go, you sometimes muddy your own standards. So to step into this moment of solitude, silence, and to step into surrender, you can have moments where you have loyalty to yourself again. You can rectify those muddied standards that you once had. Moving into my favorite part of every episode is summarizing this whole episode into a single phrase. I would say surrender is the silver lining to power. What that means is oftentimes you don't know how powerful you are until you've surrendered, until you've let go. And all of the sudden, you find you had a lot more power than you thought you did. It's the silver lining. It's the moment that just before you think you can get to the other side, when you surrender, you'll be amazed at how powerful you actually feel, because it's a form of taking accountability. It's a form of seeing in a new vision. It's like wearing glasses for the first time. 20/20 vision. You can see things from a whole new side, and ultimately it provides you with a new lane of power. And so, like I had said last week, to move into our key takeaways, but now that we've rebranded them to our sticky thoughts, or should I say our thoughts that stick, about silent surrender. Let's start at the top. It's the art of letting go. 2, surrender is like a coin. One side is letting go and the other is the pain of the battle. 3, what starts as loss transforms into preparation for the next phase. And lastly, but certainly not least, surrender is the silver lining to power. So thank you so much for hanging out with us today, and thank you for unraveling silent surrender and just letting me go off on some tangents about some of my favorite movies and TV shows along the way. So I would love to connect with you more. You can connect with us on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube at Let's Unravel Pod. Now, if you found a piece of the show that really resonated with you, please drop a comment, a like, or a subscribe on any of the platforms that you might listen to. And all of your comments and likes go a really long way on helping us reach a new audience and continue all of this momentum moving forward. Like I said, it helps us reach a wider audience and just build more friends within our community. Also, please don't forget to hit that follow or subscribe button wherever you might listen to stay up to date on all new episodes. We have new episodes every single Thursday. I guess it's that part of the episode where I tell you who my Spider-Man is. Now, I do need to just have a caveat. Andrew Garfield, I love him. I will always love Andrew Garfield, but my Spider-Man is in fact Tom Holland. I'm sorry, it had to be said. Anyways, thank you so much for hanging out. I'll see you again next week. So talk to you later. Bye.